Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision, the podcast by EO Nashville, by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. We're here to tell stories, the things that happen in the heat of battle as we're running businesses, dealing with life, family, all the other things. And with me today, as always, Mr. Robert Hartline.
Good to be in your presence once again. Thank you.
Likewise.
Yes.
And joining us as our guest, Mr. John Rowley, seasoned, tenured member of EO Nashville. Welcome.
Hey, team.
Hey.
It's good to have a meeting of the minds with you two. So let's see where it goes.
Okay.
So who was John before John was introduced to EO?
So I was a partner in a business. I was in my 20s, late 20s. I didn't have one friend or family member who'd run a business. And so I had a business partner who kind of knew some things, but had a political ad agency, and we were a national company, and really didn't feel like I knew anything about business, and honestly didn't have that much confidence as a business person, and really thought joining YEO would revolutionize my business, and it's had a big impact. But the real thing it did is it gave me a confidence that if I could be in a business as hard as mine, political advertising, very cyclical, it's marketing, so things are changing, political environment, things are changing, and have a successful business based out of Nashville, you must be doing some damn things right year in, year out, over many years. So it actually gave me confidence more than revolutionized my business. Instead of making me think, oh, I don't know anything that I'm doing, it's like, oh, it gave me the confidence that I was doing a lot of things right and how to, tighten some things up. But yeah, back in the day, so I was in a meeting in St. Louis, and this guy described EO or YEO at the time, and like 10 seconds in, I was like, okay, you had me at hello, and I need this. I got nobody. We did a genealogical study of my family. One part of my family is I think connected to John Brown from the slave rebellion on one side, and then from the 1700s in Virginia on the other. So they've been in the United States forever. We haven't found one damn entrepreneur in the whole family the whole time.
Well, how did you wind up here then? How did that happen?
I don't know. In college, I wanted to have my own business. To be honest with you, my self-concept is not, I'm an entrepreneur that's flowing through my blood. There's certain creative work I want to do that I need a company to do it in. And so, but also I'm competitive. I'm kind of a contrarian. And so it's probably just inevitable that I would be working for myself and now unemployable for others.
So when you think early into your EO experience, what was a big decision that you needed to navigate with the help of your forum back then?
I think it was probably a lot of decisions of things not to do as opposed to seizing opportunities. I had a variety of business partners over time that came up with these wild opportunities all over the world. And I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, there's this default to action. If there's an opportunity, the answer is always yes. And in my experience, having the right size company, not always a bigger company, picking the right opportunity versus every opportunity. And even if something sounds sexy and it's in China or India or whatever, that's not necessarily the best decision for your heart or for the heart and soul of the company. So I think it was probably some things like that, again, to give me the confidence to say no to something that didn't feel right. And then and then later on, after we had been in business for over 20 years, my business partner, when we decided basically one day within 30 days, which I don't advise, we decided to end the business and move employees to different places and whatnot, just having the confidence that I'd thought of everything as we were doing something that was very hard. So
Had that been building inside of you that you needed to do, and then you finally came to a realization that it wasn't going to happen unless you did the hard thing? But what What did that feel like? Because I often feel like we're like walking computers, and we have these running programs in the side, like you got Excel running and PowerPoint and a web browser. And those are just examples of the decisions we haven't made yet. And they're just running and just taking up processing power. And when you finally let all those things go, you can concentrate better. But is it something you knew you needed to do?
I don't think I was really that focused on it. I think lots of people around me. I mean, my wife's a brilliant business coach. It wasn't a surprise to her. My forum, who'd heard me talk about the evolution of my partnership, wasn't a surprise to them. And then 100 people came out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, you should have done this a long time ago." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you weren't much of a friend. You should have told me a long time ago." I mean, Monday morning quarterbacking after you break up a partnership, which it was all very amicable, but I don't know that there was a real seminal moment. Once you're in kind of a Batman and Robin, Lennon McCartney sort of relationship, humbly stated, that's kind of how it was. Very close, very collaborative. I mean, it was just time. I mean, he was a lot older than I was, and we were at different places in our life. And so I think it kind of unfolded, as opposed to it's like, here's a presentation, run it by a forum and decide. It just kind of unfolded. And I think sometimes you have to be open to that as well.
Was that something you brought to your forum for assistance?
I mean, other things, but he and I pretty much had an end of the election cycle meeting, and I was proposing all of the different challenges we had ahead. And a lot of them related to things that, he either didn't want to take on or wasn't willing to do in terms of business development. And he said, "Well, why don't we just break up?" And I said, "That sounds good." It was a peaceful moment. It was, and so it wasn't really an argument. It was just really, I was mapping out the future, and it didn't sound fun to either one of us. And so it's kind of like we laid all these cards on the table, and we picked the obvious one in a way.
So during your time in EO, besides that big breakup, what was it like rebuilding a new, different business by yourself? Did you miss having a partner, or did you feel some freedom with that? It's
been it's 80% freedom, 20% you can always use a peer who's a big brain. But the thing you really realize, I mean, we were in a 50-50 partnership over 20 years. And so if you want to develop, if you have specific ideas about a culture and you're in a 50-50 partnership and you're not aligned on it, you're not really building any culture, And so to kind of build the sort of team, the couple of the biggest insights that just make me feel like an idiot, but I don't know what you do about it. I mean, the person I was in business with, one of my guiding principles is ongoing learning my whole life. The autobiography of Malcolm X is maybe my favorite book because it's one of the great stories of somebody who started here, greatly evolved into something very, very different. Ongoing learning. And I had somebody who, though they learned a lot, they weren't into postmortems of why things went well, why things didn't go well, critical evaluation of successes. So that's my guiding life principle we're not aligned on. And then I'm a saver and this person was a spender. That's another kind of a big thing. And so to have been in business that long with that big of a thing, and it took me a couple of years of not being in business to like, gosh, I mean, that's we're pretty out of alignment. And so anyway.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about the business that you're in today and how wrapped up into politics that it really is. And
we essentially have an advertising agency that does television, digital ads, radio ads, online ads for a variety of political and policy causes. So the obvious thing, somebody runs for governor or mayor or state legislature, president, they need people that make their ads. But then there's also business groups, medical groups, healthcare groups, teachers organizations who want to pass and kill legislation, who want to get their word out to either opinion leaders or the voters writ large. They need campaigns that use all of these different mediums, everything from public relations to grassroots organizing to our wheelhouse, which is creative content targeted to people through TV, online platforms, and radio. And we do some conventional crisis management, public relations, and marketing and advertising, but that's been a lot of it. I've probably had 1,000 clients and probably 8 850 of them have been something political, a candidate, a cause, a political organization. So
how are you able to navigate when maybe you don't even believe in some position, but you're also in charge of putting a message out? That's got to be a challenge.
Well, I mean, you come from the sales business about pre-qualifying customers, right? I mean, and so, I mean, if you're dealing with people and all of the accounts are somewhere between 100,000 and millions of dollars of advertising, before we get in the room with somebody, we usually have a pretty good sense of if we're a good fit. So out of those 1,000 clients, I'd say there's 4 or 5 that I just look back and I'm like, I should have known better, or I did know better. Shouldn't have gotten business with them. They, did something, unethical. Weren't our sort of people. But a lot of that, it's a small world in politics, and you just kind of figure out if they're your sort of people or not. I mean, in terms of like policy positions, I mean, all of our stuff is pretty center left, and but there's also, as a lot of this evolves, I work with some kind of center right organizations, way left organizations, a lot of bipartisan work. Ballot measure work is all bipartisan work. So you've got a business group and a labor group. You've got super activist liberals, super activist conservatives coming together. And so, there's a handful of things we just won't get involved in and won't touch from an issue standpoint. We've turned down certain things along that. There's certain private sector things, there's certain, nuclear energy and things but you figure that out beforehand, really. And so I don't really, if we do that part right, we usually figure it out. And honestly, I don't take on many projects that don't have a team of people I've already worked with to some degree. So I know, if they weren't involved, it's probably going to be a decent culture of decision making, staying between the lines, and then just, the sort of policy things I'd want to touch on.
How has your experience in EO kind of helped you become a better leader in what you do today?
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the most influential things that I ever did around EO is one day, Julie May used to be in my forum, and Vern Harnish was coming in talking about the Rockefeller habits, and he was back when he was doing speaking tours and whatnot, and Julie was suggesting some people go to this, and I'm like, I don't know, whatever. I was busy. I mean, I was much busier, way more in my business back then, and she just kind of browbeat me a little bit. No, there was no gestalt. It's like you ought to do this, and so I did it, and it's probably just implementing some of those things. I immediately came back and got all my business partners involved in terms of a crystal clear set of core values and how we communicate as partners and things like that. And so in terms of like something like one day we're here and within another week or two, we're in a totally different place. And there's so much of that out now. I mean, this has probably been 18, 19 years. I mean, there's so much of that sort of fodder that almost seems obvious. We didn't have that kind of stuff wasn't even on YouTube then, but that was pretty revolutionary. And honestly, I think every now and then as EO members, I think we are very strong personalities in our own companies. Some maybe are even tyrants in our own companies, but when we're together, we're a little meek. If somebody's about to mess something up, and that doesn't mean you have to give advice and things like that, but there's a few of my forum members that I've had the confidence every now and then as I just like, I really think I think you're fucking this up. I think this is a fuck up, what you're about to do. And you can't do that in a forum, but to have the confidence, if not caring, to like, I've seen a lot of cowardice, honestly, when it's a really tough conversation. I was in a forum with somebody else, and they were in a very small margin retail business. And we never asked enough tough questions to know that we had a forum member that was almost $1 million in debt in a very small margin business. There was no path out of that. What a failure of a forum. And so I get a little frustrated with a chest pounding culture. I mean, I love to hear what you guys have done and how you've succeeded. I don't have any strong memories of my EO friends of their ascent to greatness, and because I rarely learned that much from it. I mean, and if I try to replicate what you did to build wireless stores or what you did, there's an iceberg of information that isn't the same in my circumstance, but it's the comeback. I mean, this sports book I've been working on is one of the great learnings. And there's a whole book just on overcoming adversity. Every great sports team was forged, not in chest pounding. We never failed, we never lost, but all the adversity they had to overcome, all the failure they dealt with that made them go to a place they couldn't have gotten to. Think of all the great sports stories: the Music City Miracle, the Miracle on Ice, Brady brings the Patriots back from the Falcons, the NC State. I mean, whatever. I mean, all the great sports stories are like these it's the comeback that I learned the most from. Others maybe get energy from, we were 1 million, then we crushed it to 5 million, then we crushed it to 50 million. And our stock ticker has just always been going up. And my experience is nobody's stock ticker is always going up. And I really learn from other people's plateaus. And maybe it's brain science. It's like your brain that's how it physiologically works. It embeds stuff on your memory that you don't forget of, oh, he almost died there. Oh, he almost screwed his whole business up there. Oh,
why is it that we are afraid to speak up in forum when you see a member doing something silly?
You guys might disagree. I mean, I had one forum member one time who was we were doing SWOT analyses. That we kind of ran out of ideas, and I don't know if it was a good or bad thing, but we were doing SWOT analyses of our own company. Didn't put a T and didn't put a W, and then this person was about to sit down. And nobody in the group was going to say anything. He just did a SWOT analysis without a weakness or threat. I said, come on, man. And he kind of defended it. And he was going to sit down again. I go, come on, you cannot do a SWOT analysis without that. And then, within a year, he had a pretty big technological fail in an online marketing situation. And it was just like, could have used a better SWOT analysis, so.
It makes me a good conversation.
Yeah, this makes me think about when I was president, people felt comfortable coming to me and asking me questions about their forum not doing well. And inevitably, it was either they're not following the rules or they're not talking about the hard things. Fortunately, our forum has kind of always gravitated toward that. Mm-hmm. What has been, so you've had some experiences on both sides of that. Mm-hmm. How do you, that's culture, right?
Well, yeah. Well, and it's also, I've never been in any forum that crushed all 12 months, I mean, certain parts of the year are better. And I mean, just basics of how often does everybody look at your P&L, for instance? You learn so much about a business from 4 or 5 numbers. And I remember I being in for a while and we weren't swapping financials. I'm like, this is an area of trust, not to mention you can't help me in my business if you don't understand my business. And then we might have gotten a little closer to understanding one of our forum mates was way in debt, and I don't know what, I mean, do you guys agree that
Well,
that
no,
happens?
I think this is a really interesting conversation just for the sheer fact, I don't think enough forums step into danger zones.
Right.
And we're, I think a lot of it too is like, there is the chest thumping, hey, things are great, my life is wonderful, everything is okay. But it's not. And I think that's a result of people not going deep.
Yeah.
And the fact that you probably, John, were you always that willing to step into danger, or did you evolve where you were like, hey, why am I not saying anything? I'm saying something and just letting it out.
I'd say the dichotomy of my being a member of a forum is I've always been very direct, and I've always been willing to like ask people questions and things like that. Now, in terms of like being the person who's the best at bringing all of my vulnerability and whatnot, that's something that's been a major evolution and whatnot. But I've always been, everybody's always thought I'm direct. I mean, I work in a business where we've got to come up with an idea, run an ad campaign, and win or lose in 90 days. We don't really have time to like, pitter pat around. I don't know. Maybe it's my mom. She's like, she's she's a pusher, A-. What about an A,
What was your comeback story?
My comeback story. It's a good question. One of it's kind of starting over, from having a business for 20 years, and it doesn't really become something you sell, to kind of start with one employee And, I don't know how it's going to go. I got my brain and I got my Rolodex, not in a business that has a lot of assets. And in retrospect, it doesn't feel like much of a comeback story. I mean, most people who knew me, not surprised. But that was interesting because I've basically been I'm kind of boring in a way. I've been doing the same kind of job. I've been making ads around political issues and dealing with a lot of political people since I was 22. I mean, I came out of radio and TV, and one of the first things I did in a political campaign is I wrote an ad. And so I haven't had a lot of like whiteboard moments, crossroads moments in my career to even where I wanted to do something different. So,
well, I think you may be short selling this because probably from 2008 on, with the advent of Facebook and the rest of the internet, the playing field has changed. How if your sports background, how has that influenced how you make decisions and how you approach your career?
Well, the ongoing learning has been more important because, I mean, to stay up with digital marketing and advertising, I mean, television and radio didn't change a lot for decades. Every couple months we have to stay on top of something different. Probably the biggest comeback, which I don't know that it plays to our peers or whatever, is, I do work a lot for Democrats. So we're in a cyclical business where we had more kind of moderate, blue dog, conservative Democrats than anybody in the United States. Well, when the pendulum swings, when the pendulum swung, we lost a couple business partners that used to bring in a lot of business. And so we went probably, our revenue in big times probably dropped by 200 or 300%. And so just dealing with the partisan swings of things where, and not realizing when it was going well for Democrats and we were having these record years. Well, maybe it wasn't us just crushing it. Maybe the pendulum had swung and lots of people were giving money because of this. And now it swings back against Obama or swings a different way. You've got to have the situational awareness to know, okay, maybe you didn't do that. And also when you're, when it goes down, that it's, that you've the same things that helped you build yourself back up. Those are some of the things, but maybe not but they may not get you out of that hole or plateau either. And what
I think is kind of interesting about that is when in EO, when you go through the process of a lifeline and you reflect, and if you look back at your lifeline, your peak, it had the valley right below it, but I think it's very difficult to remind ourselves that when we're in that valley that, oh my gosh, we're just starting something amazing, to appreciate this valley and be excited. Or maybe we're just meant to be in suffering. So we just do this all out fight to get and climb out of it.
I think that's one of the great life skills. I mean, I don't know. I haven't read the books on resiliency and things like that, but in the research I've done around this sports book, and then also you read something like Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way or whatever. So it's easy to read those things, but to be in a mindset, something bad happens. And then you go into a mindset. It's like, okay, how can I find the learning? How can I lean into this? I had something earlier this week happen. My mother was T-boned. Her car was flipped. The jaws of life pulled her out of her car. And she ends up walking away with just a scrape of a seatbelt on her and everything's fine. And so even as versed as I am in these sort of things, I'm not sure I went to a mindset of, maybe that's different if your mom, you feel like almost dies, but I have, immediately go into, okay, how do we find her a car? But how do you get into a mindset of embracing the adversity that, I think it's Pitbull. He's kind of my Svengali on this. He says there's no losing, there's only learning. I mean, that's pretty much the soundbite you've got to try to go to. I mean, and so.
Well, you probably get to see this a lot when you have a political candidate spends a pile of money, and spends all his energy and time to cultivate all his friends and family to go behind his cause, and then he loses. What is that like to see someone like that
It's sometimes it's incredibly inspiring because actually some of the most graceful people are people who have lost things like that. There are times I take it harder than they do even. I mean, it's I mean, that's the thing that's really been challenging for me because I'm a kind of a reformed jock in my head. The losing just used to kill me. I mean, and there's a great Tom Brady quote about this. He says one of the keys to sports is that you can't let the wins make you too complacent and the losses get you too low. You know, it's keeping that even strain. But some of my best relationships I've ever had are from losing efforts. I mean, because there's something about when someone wins, they then need fewer people, at least in the short term. When someone loses, they've got to figure out what's next. They may change their career. They may rebuild their career, rebuild their political career. And then there's the whole team of people who helped them, who also had certain plans if they won versus if they lost. So some of my longest term relationships come out of those sort of things because you need each other more in those instances. So.
Yeah, and I think about too, like, you know, we had a mayor that went through some trouble, and then she has, you know, rebuilding herself and then running for office again, and that's a really, I think, kind of a brave thing to do, and that is kind of also inspiring to see that, you know, you can fall from grace and then pick yourself up and do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think how some of this also relates to almost everybody's business, because, you know, some of these stories can be very narrow and this also goes back to the SWOT analysis story of, I mean, we all need people to be our blind spot detectors, you know, in our life, you know, from, wait a minute, you haven't updated your will, why? Or to your business of, you know, who's your red team? To think about what could go wrong. And this is kind of a professional role. I'm like a professional blind spot detector. And I even gave an EO talk one time. It was pretty much all about blind spots. And then at some point, either before or after that, somebody said, well, who's your blind spot detector? And it used to be a business partner or somebody. I said, well, that's a good question. You know, it's probably Mary Sobin, but she's
really good at that.
She could detect a blind spot like nobody's business. But anyway, you know, doctor, heal thyself. So
yeah. So if you're a new EO member joining a forum and you're kind of maybe showing them the ropes, what piece of wisdom would you share with them from your own experience to help them navigate and get more out of EO?
I mean, I think, you know, in things that are important in your life, you're driving them probably if you're an entrepreneur. I think sometimes new people come in and frankly, I've recommended people to EO mostly in other chapters, and it didn't go that well in terms of them getting integrated in, or then getting placed in a forum, and we all know that can happen. But it's like if anything's important in your life, you drive it. Drive it from day one. Don't assume that they will make sure it goes perfectly, because nobody can make sure it goes perfectly. And then I think also just trying to be great day one, day two, month 3, month 4 of a forum, as opposed to, we'll kind of meander for a year or two. And then also try to really get to know everybody in the forum and whatever digging deeper means. I mean, it's so that there's I did not invent this, but I think one of the great questions, whether we're just having a conversation here and we're not recording it, or you're in a forum, is what's your biggest challenge right now? Because it's hard to pound your chest, or what's your biggest challenge in your marriage? What's your biggest challenge in your business? What's your biggest challenge as a leader? It takes the conversation from it's impossible to pound your chest. If you gloss it over, it's conspicuous as hell. And I think getting to things like that really probe to then suss things out. And even sometimes I ask people that question, and then they'll turn it on me, kind of like that blind spot question. And I'm like, I need to think about this myself of what that is. And so those would be my thoughts. I mean, you're not shy on things that matter with your kids, with your business, with your family. I think don't be shy about trying to make the experience great from day one in and out of your forum. And I think the other thing with all the things you can do in and around EO, I think there's a loss of focus on it's still probably a forum that's going to keep you in or not. It's going to make a difference or not. And even if an event was sexy or going to something international was fantastic, just, putting the extra time in and you always have to have a couple people who are like carrying the flag of the forum. Everybody's not doing it every month. We're all too busy, but you've got to have one or two people that like that year, they are our forum advocates. And some of the best forums I had, that's kind of what happened. And the other thing that can be a game changer, people not revealing can really hurt things. But gosh, I had a few people who would just put they would put everything on the table, arguably too much. But if somebody's willing to go to places and share things that you're not even sure you wanted to know about them, it changes the whole dynamic of the group, because then the price of poker of like, are you really participating at an A level goes to a different place.
Yeah. So. I don't think it's been published yet, but Marty Reed was telling that story. We started EO Forum together 16 years ago, and things were kind of light, and we all felt like we were pounding our chest until Marty brought his topic. I think he was getting sued. Right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh shit, this is serious. We didn't really have any perspective for it, but it enabled us to dive in and go, okay, let's help him figure this out. Not help him necessarily, but help him understand what the landscape looks like. And otherwise, if you don't have that, if somebody's not willing to be vulnerable, the culture may never change. And that's when it falls apart. If everybody pretends like they're good, that's not why we're informed.
That's where my business education has come from. Somebody has a labor problem that costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars, or, all of those pain points become part of our business education of things we never even would have imagined happening to people. And in our own way, we tighten up our own organization. So,
coaches, I think, are very good at that, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to give you some good feedback occasionally, but their job in many cases is to figure out what's going to kill us. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that, you're not going to have a championship team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The Bob Knight basketball coach, his whole thing is everybody wants to win. Nobody wants to win more than anybody else. Who wants to prepare to win the most is, and so that's what sets, successful and not successful people apart. So
from your past forum experience, how have you seen conflict come into play, and how do you navigate conflict between formates?
Mm-hmm. That's a great one. And it's kind of a related topic. I think I don't claim to have been part of always navigating it perfectly. I think that, I think a process that susses out when people, it's usually like, there's always behavioral constitutional things, right? But then there's often these one-on-one things. Certain people are upset with certain people. We had somebody come and say, it's either that person or me. And I was just like, I've had that happen a couple of times. So that just infuriated me. But it also kind of makes you think, okay, well, this is the sort of thing that can repeat. I had a instance where I think we didn't really think we were in a competing place, but we were in marketing where we were about to get a piece of business that had been with somebody in our forum. He did like direct mail marketing like 20 years ago. And I asked somebody with maybe the president of YEO how to handle that. And he basically gave me the brilliant of advice of, why don't you fucking call the guy?
A conversation?
Yeah. Let's just call him, And so I called him, and he's like, we really don't want that business. And so we were good ever since, I think the, exploring the conflict, because the thing about conflict is it usually goes one of two ways. It can make you stronger too if you handle it the right way. But that's the main thing I've learned.
Well, asking those questions, that round of questions after the presentation happens in forum is shocking to me still to this very day, because you're going to get questions you've never considered before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what exposes you, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's done right, everything's going to get laid out there.
One of the great questions that I brought to a retreat that it was not my idea, I got from a business coach I know well, and it was, and some of my forum mates did not like this, but I said, well, it was what is, you'd go around the horn and you'd say to everybody, one thing you're doing that is helping the forum, the great strength you're bringing to this forum is A, and you would tell everybody that, and then, but the real question was, if you would do this, you would be even more effective. And so that gives you the opportunity to say being late, not bringing an A game, interrupting people, whatever. And it's a way to give feedback that's not in a call out culture sort of way, which I don't think anybody in a forum really wants to call anybody out, but it became a system because everybody gave everybody some, and it was in service to the forum. Hey, if you do this for the forum, if you keep doing more of this, we'll be great. If you would do one thing differently, we could be even better. And I mean, would we not want that sort of conversation with any freaking employee we're with? Why would we not want it with our most important peer group? Now, there are a couple members of the forum who refuse to answer that. I want to really go around and say, hey, if you would do one thing, it would be so it can be successful even if you don't have total 100% participation. They would say something milquetoast, and so it's the sort of thing you're not going to get everybody to crush, but you also got to be comfortable with that tension as well. I mean, you don't do anything great without a little tension. Tension and conflict are different. Around politics, a lot of what I do, I create productive tension. I get voters to lobby their legislator to tighten up their rear ends a little bit on something. And so anyway,
there's another word for that. You're just moving energy around.
Yeah.
And that's what naturally happens when you get in a forum situation. Because a lot of times, it's a lot like when you go from quarter to quarter when you're doing quarterly meetings, and the energy is super high at the end of a quarter because you got some alignment. We're going to start working on these goals and this mission. And then the energy of the whole organization starts going down, from forum experience to forum experience. And you get back into a good forum meeting and you're just like ready to go crush it and move forward. But I've also been in those situations where you get done with a forum and you feel like you've had energy taken away from you.
Yeah.
So have you ever had that experience in a forum where you feel like you're not fitting in your forum and you feel like you need something more?
I don't know if in the forum, I always would feel energized coming out of a forum. I mean, the thing from what you mentioned that comes to mind to me though is being great has always been something I've been very focused on. So being great. And so in another basketball coach, Phil Jackson with the Bulls, he's kind of a Buddhist. And so he would talk about with his teams who had been successful in the past. He goes, you're only successful in this moment. You're only successful in the moment you're a success. So whatever you did in the past is fine. And so I think just because we were a great forum last year, what are we going to do now in the moment? And I think the challenge to greatness, probably the most influential book I ever read. And lots of people, it's a controversial writer, but there's a book called The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And there's lots of things in the book that are just silly. But there's a moment where the great architect confronts the poser, kind of publicly thought as good architect. And he says to the lesser architect, he goes, you don't want to be great. You just want others to think you are great. And to me, that's been the professional challenge of my life. I get a lot of adulation. My ads are seen by millions and my clients are written about in the paper. But does that mean what we did was great? We won. Does that necessarily mean we were great, or are we comfortable with, and frankly, our chapter? we get a lot of adulation. Are we really great now? Or do we just get adulation? Our forum, are we really great? Or are we just leaning on because we're us, we're great?
Well, and only the present exists right now. And we were great, right? Okay, so what's next?
Yeah.
Exactly. Big doesn't make us great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good thing to settle in on. Yeah. There you go. There you go. Thank you, John. And if you are an entrepreneur in Nashville, Tennessee, and you're looking for a community to belong to, you're looking for a place where you don't feel maybe a little lonely, we have this thing called EO Nashville. You can visit us at eonashville.com, learn more about how you can belong to a forum and get together every month and then have some really cool events to attend and meet new people and learn new things about life and business. We'd love to have you come join EO Nashville. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic rest of your week.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.